So in this video, we're going to import an existing Android app, a project, into GitHub. Now, what we need to do, or what you need to do, is download the zip file that's in the resources section of this video. And I've done that already, and I've actually copied it onto my desktop, as you can see here. Then the next thing we need to do is just to extract that file. So I'm going to right click it, click on extract all, and I'm just going to extract that to my desktop. Alright, so I'm going to close that down now, and I'm going to delete the zip file because we no longer need the zip file anymore. So I'm going to delete that. Okay, now we're going to load Android Studio. So start up Android Studio. Then we're going to open this project into Android Studio, which we need to do before we can import it and import it into GitHub. So I'm going to click on Open an existing Android Studio project. Then I need to navigate to the folder where I've just unzipped that file. In my case, it's the desktop. So I'm going to click on desktop, and I'm going to open up here. Now notice how I've got a subfolder. It may or may not happen on your computer, but in my case, there's a subfolder there for the name of the zip file. Then there's a folder under that, and you can see it's got a little green icon, the Android Studio icon. So make sure you click on the Android Studio icon so you're opening the project at the right level, and click on OK. So the first time you go to open this, you'll probably get this message, and what this really means is that the project was created on another computer. And you just need to click OK just to say that you're going to be using the setup on this computer for the Android software development kit. So I'm going to click on OK to that. Now, depending on the speed of your computer and your internet connection, it may take a while for this project to fully open in Android Studio. That's because it'll need to go through and configure and index, and it'll probably come up and want to update something as well. So I'm just going to expand this and make it a bit bigger, so we can see what's going on there. Now, you may get a message like this to install a new version of a tool. If you get that message, just click on the button, and it'll come up with this message, and just make sure that's selected at the top. Click on accept, click on next, and it'll download. Now, the reason this is popping up is the Android software development kit is being updated all the time. So what's happened is a newer version of a particular part of the Android SDK has been released since I created this particular project in my Android app development course. So it just wants us to update to the latest version. And we can see it's still processing away. So we'll just pause the video until that's finished, and then we'll come back and continue. Right, and this has got another message saying there's another file that needs to be installed on this computer. So again, this is a file that's being used in the project that hasn't been installed on this computer yet. So by clicking on that button, we're installing it, which is a once-only process, which should then enable us to update and use this computer with that particular part of the Android SDK. And if you get a message like this to upgrade, just click on Update. And obviously this is a Git course, not an Android Studio course, so I'm not going to go into much detail about what's happening. From a general point of view, we're just updating to the latest version of the various software and plugins that are needed to compile this application. Alright, so at this point we're actually done now. So we've got the application now loaded into Android Studio. So I'm just going to come over here and click on Project. Then I'm going to come up here and click on this drop down, and I'm going to click on Project. And the reason for that is that we want to see all the files that are going to be used in this project. And without going into that other mode, we're not going to be able to see a couple of the important files, one of which is this git.ignore file. So I'm just going to click on that. And what I want to show you is the fact that with Android Studio, it creates a .gitignore file. Now, I did talk very briefly about that earlier in the course, but what this is a file containing all the types of files that won't be uploaded or added to a repository. Now, Android Studio has helpfully added or created this file for us, and the reason it's not including some of these files is they don't normally go into a repository. They have files like sort of temporary files or build files that shouldn't really be added to part of a repository. So Android Studio has helpfully added that file for us, or updated it, to make sure that when we do go to add this repository to GitHub, those files, the relevant file types, won't be included. Alright, so I'm going to close that file down. Alright, so the next step now is to come up here to this VCS, Version Control System menu. Then we want to go over here to import into version control. Then we want to come over here and click on share project on GitHub. Okay, you can see that it started accessing GitHub. I'll just expand this out a little bit more. Now we need to choose the repository name. Now this is the GitHub repository name that we'll see on the server. So I'm going to change this to calculator temp, and the reasons will become apparent, or the reason will become apparent shortly. This is a calculator project. Bearing in mind, this is the description of the project. It's not the commit message. We'll see that on the next screen. So I'm going to click on share. Then we actually get this other window that'll pop up. I'm just going to open this up so again we can see a little bit more and just zoom it up so we can see what's going on here. Now this actually contains all the files for the initial commit, and it actually says there add files for initial commit. And we can scroll down there, we can see there's quite a few files that are added there. Now you can override that if you didn't want a particular file for some reason to be added to the repository. You can literally just click it, then that file won't be included. But I'll re-click that because we want all files to be included. But the other thing I want to show you now is if we just go briefly back to a browser, and we go to GitHub, github.com. Then I'm just going to sign in. Notice down here already, under my list of repositories, we've now got calculator temp. So we've got the two other repositories that we created when we were using the command line part of the course. But note that the calculator temp repository is there, and we can actually click it and have a look. We can see at the moment it's completely empty. And you can see the path there is my username / calculator temp. So we go back to Android Studio. So even at this point, prior to us adding files, it has created that empty repository on GitHub. Alright, so I'm going to leave this message as the default and hit initial commit and click on OK. And if all goes well, what should happen is will automatically be uploaded to GitHub. The contents will be uploaded. Now, you might get this message pop up as well. And if this does pop up for the first time, just enter your credentials again. Now this is your GitHub login details. You can see down the bottom of the screen it says pushing. So it's actually pushed most of the files to GitHub for us. It's actually saying here, do we want to include this particular file, vcs.xml file? And that's a file that probably you don't normally need to add, but Android Studio is asking whether you want it or not. So I'm going to click on yes to that. And at this point, we've actually uploaded the project. You can see down the bottom here now, it says Git Master. And I can click on this button here, and that will take us directly to the repository. And you can see now, whereas on the previous screen it was empty, we've now got all those files. You can see literally that a minute ago the commit happened. All right, so let's go back to Android Studio. Because the other thing I want to show you what happens is once you've added a project to Android Studio, so we come up here to File and click on Settings. And then if we go up here and click on version control, you notice there's now a directory that has been added to version control. So as far as Android Studio is concerned, that directory is now a directory that's got version control, and it's going to track that for us. Now we can actually select those and delete them at any time if we want to do that. What I'm going to do now though is show you how to remove version control and how to delete a repository from GitHub, which will be useful to know, especially when you're testing. So what I'm going to do is just come back to Android. I'm going to click on cancel to get out of that first. And I'm going to close down Android Studio. And then I'm going to go back to my File Explorer, go to my desktop, and I'm going to delete that folder. So I've deleted the whole folder where we unzipped or extracted the files from the calculator project that was downloaded earlier. So let me just copy the zip file back to this desktop again. I probably shouldn't have deleted it. Okay, I'm going to copy that. I'm going to paste that back again. And I'm going to extract it again. And you'll see why I'm doing all this shortly. I'm just going to extract it to the exact same location. So it needs to be in exactly the same place that it was the last time. So now if we go into Android Studio again, I'll start that up. Now, because we didn't close down the project, Android Studio has automatically reloaded this project. However, it is now a new version of the project. It hasn't got any of the version control files, the .git folder, etc. that we added. So I'm going to click on OK to that again. You need to go through the same process of updating, which we'll go through shortly, but I'm going to close down the tip of the day. But notice over here this error, invalid VCS, version control system root mapping. So what that's saying is that you had a version control system project defined, and now it can't find the files. So if you get something like that, I'll just click on update here to keep Android Studio happy. And come up here and click on configure. Notice how this is in red now, indicating that it's no longer being tracked. So I can click on that and I can remove it. You just click on apply or click on OK. And that'll keep Android Studio happy that this is no longer a tracked project and it's no longer under version control. So while that's updating, the other thing I want to do is quickly show you how to delete a project from GitHub. So all you need to do is make sure that you've got the repository you want to delete opened. Click on Settings. Scroll down to the bottom. Come down here and click on Delete this repository and type in the name. And until you type in the exact name of the repository, the button doesn't get enabled. You can see I've now typed it in exactly. Click on I understand, and the project, or the repository rather, has been deleted. Alright, so now that we've done that, let's swing back to Android Studio and we'll upload the, or import the project into GitHub properly this time. So back in Android Studio, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to click up here into VCS, click on import into version control, select GitHub. This time I'm going to call it calculator project. We'll call it calculator app. We'll leave the remote name as origin. Remembering we talked about origin in the command line section of the course. And we'll put, say, Tim Bachaka's calculator app from his Android 7 app development course. That probably describes the project pretty well. Click on share. And we're going through the same process now. And this time I'm going to put initial commit of the calculator project files. Click on OK. You can see down the bottom it says pushing to GitHub master. It's uploading all the files that in that folder. And now if we go back to our file and go into settings, this will be preferences if you're on a Mac. You can see that project has been added again under version control. So I'll cancel out of that. And we've successfully shared the project. As you can see there, I can click on that to go straight to GitHub. And there's our project again. You can see it's the new version now. I've actually made a typo there. I called calculator instead of calculator, but we'll leave that for now. But the bottom line is that's now been imported and it is working fine. All right, so let's go back to Android Studio again. Because the other thing I want to quickly show you now is the actual commands that have been used. Because obviously this all seemed to happen auto-magically. So you might be wondering, well, what commands did Android Studio use to communicate with GitHub? Well, the great thing in here is that we've got this version control tab that we can open. If we click on that, that actually gives us a list. We've got firstly we've got a list of unversioned files. But over here on the console, it actually gives us a list of all the commands that were used and all the files, which is pretty handy. So you can see if we scroll right up to the top there, we've got the actual commands. Right at the top here, you can see initialized empty Git repository, and it points to the location on on this computer where that happened, and then also the .git folder. And then we've got all the commands that Git has added or has used to add all the files. And you can see what it's done here. It's actually added them file by file. There's quite a few files sort of going across there. And we're getting this message here about a line feed will be replaced by carriage return line feed. And that's because the original project was created on a Mac, but we're using Windows. So it's just a different type of file. So that's happening automatically when we imported the project. And if we scroll right down, we can even see some of the other commands. You can see the committer name. My name is showing there as the initial committer, and that was the name that's been set up, that we set up when we're using the command line section of the course. And you can see all the files as well. It's giving us all the modes, and we talked about that in the past when we went through the command line section to add a project. And right down the bottom, it's giving a list of the deltas and so forth and how many objects, and then where it actually deployed it to, which we know because we've seen that in a browser. So you can see that it's a lot more efficient to be using something like Android Studio to access your files or use version control with your files. Very quick and very little for us to do other than just select a few options and just type in the name of the repository and the description and then the initial commit message. And obviously select the files that we wanted to use. So in the next video, we'll do a bit more with Android Studio and GitHub and Git in general, and we'll actually leave this version control tab open so we can see what's going on as we perform each operation. So I'll see you in the next video.